Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it is the final day of July, July 31st in the year of 2024. It's episode number 165 of Material Issues. I'm Mark Hershberger of Pop Detective Records. I'm over here in sunny South Jersey. Dinner time, as always. 3 hours earlier, my good buddy, the mostest from the West Coastest. It's the first time I've used that on this show. President of the
last.
President of the International Pop Overthrow Festival, Mr. David Bash. David, how the heck
Mark,
you feeling?
I'm doing great out here. It's I live in the valley, as they say. It's really hot, as it usually is. It's going to be that way for a while. Thankfully, IPO LA is coming up in 2 days. Thankfully, that's in downtown LA, where it will still be hot, but not as hot.
Yep, IPO LA right around the corner.
Really right around the corner. A lot of really cool reunion shows. Some of these bands you won't know because you didn't live out here back in the day, but Spanish Kitchen, Double Knot Spies.
Double Knot Spies, yeah.
Supremium, Backcountry, at least one other that hasn't played for a long time. They're going to be reuniting for our 25th IPO LA. And speaking of which, I just received these a couple of days ago. Wow. This is IPO Volume 25, 69 tracks by bands from all over the world. And this will be given away to anyone who pays admission to get into IPO LA, any of the shows we do. Only one per customer, though, people. So, if you get one and then you come to another show and they hand you one, just say, I already got it. Because Omnivore Recordings, our label, is also, they've released it for the purpose of selling it to people who can't make it to the festival.
Right.
It should be, I think there'll be a pre-order link on their website probably in another week, and it's going to be officially released to the non-LA IPO public early September.
And that's three CDs, 69 tracks, and
it looks great.
Fantastic! Look at that. What a beautiful set. You can pick that up with your price of admission, no extra cost for a 3 CD International Pop Overthrow Volume number 25 set. And IPO LA is being held where?
It's being held at Redwood Bar.
Redwood Bar,
which is a really cool venue downtown. It's got great food, great vibe. I really like the staff. Well, most of them. Nice. There's one person in particular, but we won't go there. Most of the people are really cool, and I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Nice. Well,
big thank you to Eddie Lopez, who books the club, for having us back to do the whole festival there. And kudos to Steve Stanley, of course, for designing.
Always does
doing a great design for this compilation. Watch check. I got something new here.
Look at you.
My favorite color. I always say it's purple, but I think it might be plum. And I never had a plum colored watch until now. This is the
Nubio?
Huh?
Is that a Nubio? No.
It's a Stratton Special.
Oh, nice.
Tim. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, it's a racing watch. This one is Mecha Quartz, meaning although it runs with a battery, when you use the chronograph, the hand does discrete little movements rather than the tick, tick, tick the quartz does. So it's kind of cool. And I love the plum color. I just really love plum. What can I tell you? And I like plums, for that matter. and I like Eve plum.
Eve plum. And you're gonna have to build an addition onto your house just to hold your watch collection one of these days.
I know, it's crazy. I think I probably have more watches than most women have shoes, and that's saying a lot. Just a couple of recent purchases.
Yep.
That people might be interested. One band that I've always liked, and I'm sure you like them too, is The Pursuit of Happiness.
Oh God, yeah.
And this is an album that is pretty much forgotten. It was released, I think, in '96. I want to say originally CD only, but finally it's been reissued on vinyl. Universal Music Canada under record label. That's
Wow.
one of their subsidiaries. I haven't opened it yet. It may be colored vinyl. I don't know, but anyway, it's just very cool to have this on vinyl. The artwork looks so much better that way too.
Yeah.
Here's another one I got. This one might make some people chuckle, but I don't care. I always like this one Hanson album, the one that has Bop on it. I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I like what I like. And, I was a big Jackson 5 fan growing up, and Bop definitely imbues that spirit. And
nothing wrong with a little Bop.
The other songs on the album were, of similar ilk. And this one, this may be the first vinyl issue of this. If not, it's the second one. The first one must be really rare. It's very cool because it's a double vinyl gatefold with bonus tracks. And it's definitely been fun revisiting that.
Very nice. Look at you.
Yeah, what can I say? All right, well, we should bring our guest on.
I've
been an admirer of his ever since I've read. Well, I have to admit, I've read 2 of his books only: "The Love You Make," an inside story of the Beatles, and "Heroes and Villains." Let me grab that here. The true story of the Beach Boys, and it says the true story of the Beach Boys. Some of it, we'll talk about this with our guests, but some of this is so outrageous that its truth value has been called into question by many people. I'm sure our author is well aware of that. But David Leaf, who we had on the show a couple of years ago, who is the foremost historian on the Beach Boys, assures us that everything in here is true. Nice. So if he says it's true, it's true. But it was very, very eye-opening to people like me, to Beach Boys fans. Some of the stuff in here, well, first of all, it's very entertaining. And secondly, some of the stuff is so outrageous, you just can't believe that the Beach Boys or individual members were doing some of these things or involved in some of these things. But it's pretty amazing, and I can't recommend it enough to Beach Boys fans. If you don't have this book, you need to find it. I don't know if it's in print, but it's very easily found on eBay and other places like that. But he's written a lot more than that. He wrote a book on Marjo Gortner, who I've seen the documentary on Marjo. Very fascinating guy. Always thought he looked like Peter Bonners without the nose. Yeah. I think it was the fro. Anyway, he's written books on Studio 54. He wrote a book on Halston, the designer, which was made into a Netflix series. And a couple of the actors, I believe they won awards for being on the show. So that's pretty amazing. Yeah, he's written things about so many different subjects, and we're really glad to have him here. So without further ado, would you please give a huge Material Issues welcome to Mr. Stephen Gaines.
And there he is.
Hey, Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
Gee, I'm so pale compared to you guys. You could see I lead my entire life indoors at the typewriter, at the keyboard, rather.
I'm not that dark. Believe me, it's just the lighting.
Thank you for that introduction, by the way.
You're very welcome.
Writing Heroes and Villains. Oh, by the way, first of all, David Leaf, who you mentioned, I call Rabbi Leaf because he is the Beach Boys rabbi. I mean, he knows everything, everybody. He is totally, and I am so pleased that he says everything in the book is true. He was by my side while I wrote this book. He opened doors. He introduced me to people. He really gave me his trust and faith. And in fact, before anybody saw the book, he flew to New York, came to my home, and read the book from cover to cover. And I told him if there was something that he found disturbing, that I would take it out, because he was so responsible for the access that I had. And
wow.
And there wasn't, so I'm very pleased. It doesn't mean I didn't make some mistakes, but nothing in it is fake. I know, it's pretty weird, right? With the stuff that went on behind doors.
And there's our first quote from the book.
There's your first quote.
Nice and warm in there, which I guess it was Dennis who said that to was it Dennis who said that to Carl Wilson when he lost his virginity?
Yes, when Carl lost his virginity, right?
Wait, that's in my book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it nice and warm in there? And the response was the heat was on, which
Oh,
I don't know what Carl probably didn't even know what Dennis was talking about.
Carl was, well, I think Carl was like, what, 15 or something, and it was a hooker, and Dennis was waiting in the hallway to be next. And so when Carl came out.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
unbelievable.
But it's sure. See, yeah, this is one of my friends who we constantly quote from the book. This is probably our most used quote. It sure is weird, which Brian was describing some phenomenon in the Beach Boys world, and it sure is weird. Just came out of nowhere. No, I mean you had some amazing quotes. I mean, my favorite was termination, which you don't know if nobody knew if he meant the end of the phone call, the friendship, or his life. It turned out he did lose his life a little bit later, and which is tragic. And I remember I don't know if you'll remember this, Stephen, but I was aware of the Howard Stern show, even though I was living out here in the 80s. At that time, we didn't get Howard Stern. But one of my friends from New York sent me a tape of your appearance on Howard Stern, talking about the book. Do you remember that?
I remember being on the Howard Stern show. I guess it was for the Beach Boys, but I think somehow he also talked about the Beatles. He got hooked on Yoko Ono. But I do remember being on the show, and he was very nice to me, because at the time, Howard Stern has changed now. He's pretty nice to everybody. But at the time, he could rip you to shreds.
Oh, my God, yes.
So I was cautious, but I do remember being on the show. What did I say? Something strange?
No, you were great. I remember later on when he took the call, somebody called in and said, "Howard, why are you so ugly?" and you said it must have been Murray Wilson because he ruined everybody else. That's all I remember about that. No.
One of the great things about writing this book is I had finished the Beatle book, the book on the Beatles, and it took like 3 or 4 years writing it until it came out and everything. And we wanted it to be really complete because I had access to a lot of people that nobody else would have had access to. And so then after that was over, the same publishers asked me to write a book about Calvin Klein. So I said, okay. And, I got on the telephone and I called the first Calvin Klein person. And I said, "Hi, my name is Stephen Gaines." And they slammed the phone down on me. So I took a walk on the beach and I said, "Why are you doing this for a living?" And, courage, call the next person. So I called the next Calvin Klein person and they slammed the phone down. So she yelled, "We know what you're doing." I don't know. And she slammed the phone down on me. So I called the publishers and I said, "I can't bear this. I can't do this. I'm sorry, I'll pay you back the money." And the publisher said to me, "Well, what about the Beach Boys?" And I said, "What about them? Oh my God, would that be okay?" And they said, "Yes." So I decided I really wanted this Beach Boy book to be as solid and researched as the Beatle book was. And so I packed up and I moved to California. When you write a book about a group or something, or even a designer, you've got to really get into, know their friends, know where they hung out. It becomes part of your life. And so the Beach Boys, it was amazing. I just got completely, deeply involved in the Beach Boys and their wives and ex-wives and friends. I got to meet everybody. I got invited to places. I was brought into the circle. The only people that didn't allow me into the circle was Mike Love.
Oh, yeah.
And who else was, I think really it was Mike Love that was, Mike scared me. He literally scared me. I really thought, that I stopped going to the band rehearsals because I walked into a band rehearsal and he looked at me from across the room like, "I'm going to come and strangle you." And I strangle so many people, nobody's going to stop me. So I said after that, you know what? I'm not going back. I don't want to be near Mike Love because he really could, haul off and smack me one.
Mm.
Well, I mean, there's the part of the book that I think was, we want to talk about eye-opening revelations. The part where Mike Love was placed in a straitjacket after going on that, that wild goose chase with his car and hitting his psychiatrist. I can't help but laugh because that's something that I mean, like, wow, really? Mike Love was in a straitjacket?
I questioned it so many times because I didn't want to get sued and I didn't want to write something that was untrue. And then I forget who it was in the book. I used their quote in the book, said, no, I saw him in a straitjacket. So, but of all the people who I thought would wind up in a straitjacket in that group, it wasn't necessarily Mike. You had to stand in line for the straitjackets.
Well, here's what I find amazing about this book. And when I say it to people, they look at me like I'm absolutely crazy. But you have to think about it the way I frame it. In the context of what happens in the book, Charles Manson is barely in the top 5 most evil people. In the context of what happens in the book, because the worst he does in the book is threaten people. And he never actually, because the murders aren't really part of it. I mean, you got Murray, you got Mike Love, you got Rocky Pamplin, you got Stanley Love. They were worse than him in the book. There's no doubt about it.
In the book, yeah.
And of course, people will say to me, "What are you talking about? Manson did this and that." No, not in the book. He didn't.
There are a lot of people with bad values. Let's put it that way in the book, and it's truly incredible. It was a free for all. Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s. It was a free for all, and there was a lot of bad behavior going on. But Rocky Pamplin. It was amazing that I got Rocky Pamplin to give me an interview. I promised I would put his Playgirl spread in. The publisher was very, very upset. If you notice, the page kind of ends. We turn the page where it would get too low.
Oh yeah.
Put Rocky's naked picture in, but he was self-serving, but he was pretty honest about what had happened. And look, in a weird way, I don't blame Marilyn for having an affair with him. You hear about a lot of rich guys having an affair with a yoga instructor or somebody having an affair with their workout partner. And I think that, having an affair now with your husband's bodyguard, it wouldn't be so shocking these days.
No, not at all. Well, I mean,
I love Marilyn, by the way. Love Marilyn Wilson.
No, I've met her a couple of times, and she's nice. Yeah,
warm, yeah. Nice, a good person, lovely person.
Well, when your publishers brought up the idea of the Beach Boys and doing a book on them, were you a Beach Boys fan at the time? Were you a super fan? Did you know a lot about their story and you thought, oh, I could really sink my teeth into this? Or did you need to move to California and start researching how much of a story really was there?
Well, what happened was yes, I was a Beach Boy fan, but I wasn't a super fan. I was friends with a lot of people in the music business. There was one guy in particular, Bob Fiden, who was an A&R for RCA and a couple of other companies. And he discovered Patti Smith, for example. He had very, very high taste in music, very fine, interesting taste in music. And one day he said to me, Holland and the Beach Boys. And I said, well, really? And he said, you're out of your mind. Don't you realize that they're geniuses? And listen to this and listen to that. So I started listening to it, and I'm getting chills now, even talking about it. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. So when Brian was making his comeback, I don't know when that was, 76 or 77, Brian is back. New York Magazine, this is a big magazine in New York, was opening up a magazine in Los Angeles called New West. And I was a contributing editor at New York Magazine. So they said to me, why don't you go out there and write for our second issue and write a story about Brian Wilson coming back? So I found myself inserted into this world that I didn't know. First of all, Gene Landy was there. Nobody understood about Gene Landy. And Gene Landy said, I want to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. I said, you do you? And I'm from New York Magazine, though, New West. He said, no, he said, but I know if you write this piece right, that the next thing is you could get me on the cover of Rolling Stone. So I said, I can't promise anything, but the thing in my mind was this psychiatrist wants to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. What is it he's really after? So Gene Landy gave me access to Brian and to everybody else that he had control over. He didn't have control over a lot of the other guys, but I was able to interview Dennis at that point. I was able to interview a lot of people and also follow Brian around and even go into one of Brian's psychiatric sessions. And which, of course, it's unheard of and it's unethical and it's all the rest of it. But there was nothing ethical. Talk about bad people, that were involved in the Beach Boys' life. I mean, he was the worst. He took such advantage of this poor man who had such deep problems and needed to be medicated, and he was forcing him to bowl, bowling a game or something, to teach him lessons. But one of the things that happened is Landy left me alone in the room in his office with Brian. And I talked to Brian for a while. And I always had the feeling that Brian was a big guy. And I always had the feeling, I don't know. I felt just uncomfortable. And I had spent 15 or 20 minutes with Brian. I could have gone on. But Brian was sick at the time. And I felt unfair. So I went to the door to get out. And I pulled on the door handle and it came off of my hand.
Wow.
Well, I think Landy did it purposely. I think Landy had unscrewed it or somehow from the other side. I think Landy had purposely stuck me in his office with Brian. So it's all on tape. I don't remember exactly what happened after that, but it's all on tape. And look, you can't help but love Brian. I mean, Brian didn't have a mean bone in his body. He was a good soul, and he was taken advantage of, from all sides. So that was the thing with Landy. And then, so I wrote this article called Brian Wilson's Trying to Catch Another Wave or something that appeared in New West magazine, which was, a lot of people liked it. It was very successful. And they flew me back out there and I did a whole bunch of radio and TV. And then that was it. Then I wrote the Beatles. And then this thing happened with Calvin Klein, which made me miserable. So when they said the Beach Boys, I said, I have Gene Landy and I have Brian and I have all of these things already from my article that I wrote for New West magazine, that would be great. But it was only then, the second time around, that I realized how complicated the story was, how many characters, how many moving parts there were. It's this magnificent, incredible story. And that Dennis had drowned. I mean, the horrible irony of that. And of course, we all loved Dennis as bad as he was. He was a bad boy, but who could not love him? I guess.
Right.
And what woman didn't?
Who was that, Karen? Who said,
I'm still looking for the Karen Lamb Memorial brick, but
poor Karen Lamb. She certainly.
I know.
What a shame. Boy, did I like her a lot. So the first day that I went to interview Karen, she was living in this tiny little cottage on Venice Beach. And so after we worked for a couple of hours, she said, let's take a swim. And I said, oh, but I don't have a bathing suit. She said, well, swim in your underwear. Everybody does. So I thought, okay. So we went out to the beach. And there I am, flopping around the water in my jockey shorts with Karen Lamb in a bikini, not knowing what the heck is going on in my life. I mean, that was nuts. But I like Karen very much. But she was.
Damn, I missed that party.
She was duplicitous, and she was duplicious, or however you would say it. I liked her very, very much, and she was.
It was tragic what ended up.
I have all these tapes. And I'm trying to convince a publisher, any publisher, to publish the transcripts of all these tapes. But nobody thinks that a Beach Boy book of that kind would sell. So it's very, very hard. I called Rabbi Leaf and I asked him about it. And he said, there are a lot of Beach Boy books and they're very, very hard to sell mass market, like a publisher really wants. So, I'm sorry. I kidnapped this interview.
No, we want you to talk.
That's what we like to hear.
There are a lot of things. I have to. All right, I have to ask you something, and
It's so complicated. There's so much. I know. Go ahead, dude.
yeah, I mean, you may not be thrilled with this, but it's something that I've wanted to know for a long time. The one guy in the book, well, oh, the one guy in the book that you talk very little about is Bruce Johnston. I mean, Al Jardine looked like a man waiting for a bus. So obviously there was nothing on him because he was so squeaky clean. Bruce, we really know very little about. And I mean, you don't have to answer this, but were you protecting him? Did he give you information in exchange for some anonymity about something?
Refused to speak to me.
Oh, is that what happened?
Never interviewed him. No, he never interviewed him. And by the way, I've never done that any time in journalism where, I promise. I mean, if somebody asked me not to write something beforehand or this is off the record, you have to respect that.
No, of course.
And so, but no, I didn't interview him. Now I feel I should have really done that more because he really had more information. But at the time I was dumb. I made a mistake and I didn't interview him. And there were other avenues that I didn't go down that I could have. But I did the best I could at the time with the knowledge that I had.
There had to be. I mean, there's many avenues. There's so many avenues. You at the time, you wouldn't even know which avenue was an avenue that you might have missed.
That's true.
Because there was so much. It's such a perfect storm of a story. Not only from their youth and their dad and everything that led to, the way they wrote Brian wrote songs and how he disappeared in his mind to do that and how it turned into there's just so many avenues. And so we didn't hear that much about Bruce in the book, but we could probably pick out 20 other things that we could say, well, why didn't you talk about? Because there's a lot in this story.
Yeah.
As much as you uncovered, there was so much more.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote the Croxy Adams interview. They want to see the Croxy Adams interview. Croxy was a Manson girl, wasn't she?
And no, she wasn't a Manson girl. She was a Dennis girl. She was the one who said Dennis was the greatest stud at 23. Mm. But Manson, when Croxy went to visit Dennis. Yes. She confronted Manson, who threatened her, and this is all from the book. And she said, "Okay, let's see what you got. Get it up, you punk peon." And because he had threatened to slice her throat, and according to the book, he cowed. And there it is. He's a punk. He cowed and didn't do anything. Wow. Now here's something I have to ask you because my friend and I looked up Croxy Adams on Google, and it turned out to be a session musician who was male. Now is that another person?
Yeah, it's another Croxy Adams. Yeah.
Wow, how can there be? That's amazing.
That name? You mean Croxy? I wonder what Croxy. I'm gonna see
Croxy Adams. Two of them, and.
There must have been because I interviewed.
He had her in a spot, but he didn't go for it.
And she was definitely a girl. Let's see.
She's definitely a girl in your book.
Yeah.
Diane Croxy Adams. Oh, her name was really Diane Adams.
Diane, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny because we looked up Croxy Adams and found some LA session musician from the mid-'70s who was a man.
There can't be two Croxy Adams.
Apparently there are.
Oh, that's amazing stuff.
He met her. He went there to find him. Diane, whose nickname was Croxy. He had an affair. She was only 15 years old when Dennis had an affair with her.
Wow.
This book is shocking. This book absolutely is shocking.
No, there were so many shocking things in there. And
I couldn't help it. I didn't ask for it to be shocking. I didn't ask for it to be shocking. I mean, I didn't make anything worse than it was. It was already so bad. It's already so shocking that I didn't have to add anything.
No, you didn't have to try. But I mean, the Beach Boys had such a squeaky clean Yeah, there's no
I
love.
love that. I love that book. I loved Heroes and Villains
Oh.
much more than I loved the Beatle book. And it was a great achievement. The Beatle book.
Well, there weren't as many revelations in the Beatles book because so many people knew about their trials and tribulations, trials literally and figuratively, like Paul with his marijuana bust and everything. But people knew that they were up to no good. But the Beach Boys, only insiders knew that, and they didn't know the extent of it until I mean, I'm as big a Beach Boys fan as there is. But when I read that book, it was like, oh my God, this is. But I want to go back to something else.
You said to me earlier before we were on the air about quotes that you're always quoting, like Brian said, I feel like the I in nitwit or something.
Yeah, the I in knit.
In knit.
In other words, he felt really low. He felt very low, like
Right.
very insignificant.
Right.
Yeah. That's an early quote from the book when he was feeling so bad about himself. He felt like the I in knit, NIT.
But I want to go back to something else you said that has nothing to do with, well, only tangentially has to do with the Beach Boys book. You were talking about getting some flack for the Calvin Klein book, and you were no stranger to flack, because when you wrote The Club about Studio 54, you also revealed a lot of things that maybe people on the inside didn't want out, and apparently what's his name? The owner, Steve Rubell, was none too happy about it. How did you deal with that controversy, and did it affect you?
I brought it on myself. I don't want to say writing The Club was a mistake, because at the time it didn't seem like a mistake. I met a Studio 54 bartender. First of all, I went to Studio 54 all the time. And because I was the top of the pop columnist for the New York Sunday News and wrote about rock and roll, and disco was kind of part of that beat. And I became friends with Steve Rubell and that whole crew there. And I met a bartender, a 21-year-old bartender. And I said, will you tell me your story and we'll make it into a novel? So I wrote this novel that was a roman à clef, it's called, which the characters all represent somebody else. But this was transparent. Steve Rubell was Steve Shorter, and Halston was Ellison, and I was really playing with fire. I practically named these people and all the things that they did, and the book was trashy and didn't reflect well on me and my writing or anything else. And they just somebody called up the bartender and said they were going to have his legs broken, and.
Whoa.
No, seriously, I was on.
No, I believe you.
And because we talked about a lot of things where they hid the money and stuff like that, and the bartender slept with everybody, men and women. So there were all sorts of lurid details in it and everything. So they threatened lawsuits, and everybody said my career was over. And I was really despondent. It was like January or February of 1980. So I thought I'd never write again, and I didn't know what to do. And then the phone rang, and it was Peter Brown of the Beatles. Peter Brown called to say, you can make it okay. You can get married in Gibraltar, Spain, from John's song of the Ballad of
You
John.
actually said that?
John. That's in
No. Peter Brown said that to you?
No. He didn't say that to me.
Would have been cool.
That's so funny. That's so funny. No, he didn't say that to me. What happened was through my being, he had been head of the Robert Stigwood organization, the Bee Gees and Jesus Christ Superstar, and I had met him through that, and he was a friend of mine, and he even gave me my 30th birthday party.
Oh wow!
Big party, and he had this sprawling apartment, still has, on Central Park West. So he called me up, and it was in all the newspapers, by the way, that they were going to sue me. It was in syndicated columns and stuff. So he called me up and he said, I hear you're in a bit of trouble, and I said, he had a very heavy English accent, or not a heavy English accent, but a very proper English accent. So I said, yeah, it's terrible here, and I don't know what to do. And he said, well, I'm in Laguna. I'm living in Laguna. I have a 3-bedroom condo. And I'm thinking about writing a book about the Beatles. Why don't you forget about all the trouble that you're in New York and fly out here and you can have one of the bedrooms, and we'll write a Beatle proposal. And he saved my life because my career was over in New York. He didn't care about what I had written about the Studio 54 people. And so we wrote a proposal. We sold the book. And on September 1st, September 1st of 1980, when Peter Brown's lease was up on his condo, we moved to London. Now, you think about it, John was killed December 8th of 1980. So I started interviewing everybody in those months leading up to John's death. So all the interviews, except for Yoko, in The Love You Make, this book I wrote with Peter, were done just before John was murdered.
Wow.
And it's fascinating to hear what people would say about him, not knowing that they were going to lose him in another few weeks or a few months or anything. And that book was an international hit, and it revived my career. You know, we kind of buried the Studio 54 book. So, but I've been in trouble a lot of times then. I wrote the Calvin Klein book, and they wanted to kill me again. And, you know, I mean, they were just furious, and they stopped the book with one publisher, and I had to go to another publisher. And, you know, so I've sworn off books that have got me into trouble. I think I have. I don't know what you know.
You may still have another one in you. Who knows?
I have one more book left in me. One more book left in me, and I hope it doesn't put me in my grave. You know, but I do. In fact, you're right. I have one more book left in me, and I don't think it's going to be anything like the other books.
Well, as long as it's not about a fashion designer or a disco club, what else could we? What else could we
fashion
do?
designer worked out well.
Yeah.
That's you know, if you're into the fashion business, it's another book that I had to go into their world and find out all about haute couture, things I knew nothing about. I came from the rock and roll world. So, and you were right. They made a Netflix series, and Ewan McGregor won the Emmy for Best Actor that year, playing Halston. You know, so, and then Peter Brown and I just did another book. We published some of the transcripts from The Love You Make. Right.
Right.
And that's in a new book called All You Need Is Love.
Yeah.
Is that available now?
Yeah, it's out. The publisher didn't do much press on it. It was really kind of sad. But yeah, it's sold all around the world, and it's out, and it's the real transcripts of especially Paul, Ringo, Yoko. Oh my God. And Yoko's quite a character. She certainly is. I just want to tell you one thing about Yoko. Yoko smoked gold-tipped cigarettes. Okay, gold filter. It's very expensive. But she would only take 2 or 3 puffs on it. And then she'd put out the cigarette very carefully and put it down in the ashtray. And then she'd light another, and she'd line them up with the gold tips. And the entire time I was interviewing her, which was about 2 hours, I watched the gold tips on the ashtray and how carefully she did it. And if you ask me anything about the room or what she was wearing, I can only tell you about the gold tips in the ashtray. You know, she was a most peculiar person, and I'm not sure completely honest, but John made that choice. He made that decision, and it was another fascinating story I happened to walk into. So I've been blessed. But I don't listen to the Beatles music. I do listen to the Beach Boys.
And that's something.
Why don't you listen to the Beatles?
Well, you know, I mean, I sometimes listen to, in my life, John's music. I think I've heard the Beatles music just so much. Paul, it's amazing if you watch that Peter Jackson documentary or whatever his name is. If you watch Paul and John Lennon writing together, this music comes out of them. It's so amazing that Paul was such a brilliant, and John, that they just found this music, and all these different songs came out of them. And they were both geniuses in magic that they found each other in Liverpool, and that
it really is.
So I'm sorry, I'm babbling on.
No, I can understand that. I grew up a Beatles fanatic, and all my life, of course, you know, the Beatles music. You heard it all the time. I was a fanatic. It's hammered into you. Now, I was a casual Beach Boys fan. I liked their hits, you know, but I wasn't an album collector of the Beach Boys and things. And it wasn't until probably into the 80s and beyond where I kind of, when I started pushing back on the Beatles because I've heard it all a million times, and then started getting back into the Beach Boys catalog and listening to all the album cuts and how wonderful it was. So there's kind of a genesis of that for me as well. So I get where you're getting from. It's like, I don't really listen to Beatles anymore, but I will listen to Beach Boys.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many Beatles reissues coming out that you can't help but hear them again. I mean, yeah, you're right. If not for that, I probably wouldn't just put a Beatles album on casually, but because of all the reissues, and the reissues are great because they're including as bonus tracks outtakes and demos and things like that, so you actually get to see the songs come to fruition.
But David, I think that people at a time thought that the Beach Boys were corny and that they were only about the cars and the girls and the surf and everything. And there were just a few people in the music business. I mentioned Bob Fiden. There was another guy, a record promoter, who had something to do with the Fillmore, named Michael Klempner. And Michael,
I know him.
He was passed, but he was such a big Beach Boy fan. And he was another guy who kind of took me aside and said to me, "You've got to reconsider the Beach Boys." And he booked them into the Fillmore in places where nobody thought they belonged because they were in hard rock.
Mm-hmm.
So a few people really pulled for them when things were going different and brought them back to life. It wasn't. Did they play for Ronald Reagan at the White House?
Yeah, much later when they were already, when they were reborn. Yeah,
back reborn already. Yeah,
but
my club's a big Republican.
Yeah. We don't have to go there. That's pretty awful. But one thing I remember from the Howard Stern show that made me happy was, Howard was sort of disparaging the Beach Boys because, like most casual fans, he only knew the hits. And you said something like, well, the Sunflower album's really good. And that's my favorite album of all time by anybody.
I did, really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the Sunflower album, but I don't remember schooling Howard. But he lives about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from here.
Oh,
it's
really?
So crazy. Yes, that he lives. Here.
Are you still in touch?
No, if I see him, I say hello. I auditioned for a radio show on Sirius, which I didn't get, and it was because of Howard. He said they were looking for something from the end of Long Island, from the Hamptons. And he suggested you should try this guy because I was on local NPR here. And so I think that was so lovely. First of all, I was shocked to know that Howard listened to me on the local NPR station. That was amazing. Yeah. But he got me my audition, and I failed.
I'm sorry.
I did. I failed. They never called me back.
But you mentioned something there, and I just want to go on an aside here if I can, because you reminded me. You co-founded the Hamptons International Film Festival.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Are you still involved with the film festival? And the only reason I'm getting there is I was just acting in a short film, and
really?
I'm going to see it for the first time tomorrow, and they're now starting the whole submission to the film festival, and I don't have any experience at all with film festivals except you hear some of the big names. But I was just curious of what your involvement was in the Hampton Film Festival, International Film Festival, and just for somebody like me who's involved in a brand new 14-minute short film.
Tell me about the short. What part do you play?
I'm the guy. I'm the lead. It's a film called Sunrise Sunset, and
what's it about?
It is about. I'll show you the poster that just came out. There it is.
Beautiful poster.
Thank you.
Whose eye is that?
That's me.
Wow.
Me. That's my name up top, Mark Hershberger, and Sunrise Sunset.
You have to have all this framed. That's just beautiful. Yeah. So what's it about?
Well, it's about a man who lost his wife. She passed with cancer, and the teenage son couldn't handle the loss of his mom, and he ran away. So he's now on a quest to find his teenage son, and he's emotionally torn from everything that's going on. So he's basically trying to track where his son might have gone or what he's heard about him. And he's living out of his car. He's living out of dingy hotels. He's running out of money. He's running out of emotion. He's running out of everything. And his wife is past, his dead wife is revisiting him in his mind and his thoughts in these places. And his son as a toddler is visiting him in a parking lot when he's sleeping in his car. It's just kind of an emotional ride through being torn apart in two different ways and trying to come to some.
It's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
congratulations to you for going through that and doing that. That's great.
Yeah.
So starting the film festival for me was like doing another book about somebody that I really didn't know much about, because I didn't know anything about a film festival. Somebody said to me, a film festival in the Hamptons, and a light went off in my head. So I was there, and I did shape the film festival, and I was a co-founder. And then after 8 years, it grew, and there was a bigger board and everything. And after 8 years, I said I have to leave the board. 8 years is a long time to be on a board. But people disagree with each other, and the direction of the film festival, I had something very parochial that I wanted that film festival to be. So, but I can tell you that they definitely do short films. And if you go to their website, there is a process through which the film has to be submitted. Now, even when I was vice chairman, it was so sacred, this process, that, if you, and it is, I think, at every film festival, by the way.
Yeah.
Because if board members or other people said to the artistic director, "Here, this is a good friend. Oh, Mark, interviewed me on them, and the story seems so touching that that's it. You're it's against the rules. Actually.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Do it. They have a whole thing for.
Well, I know the producer and the director that they've already started the process of some of the big film festivals submission. They've got 15 more they're doing in the next 3 to 4 weeks as far as submissions are. I guess they're all over the world. I didn't know they were.
Oh, there's film festivals on every street corner now. They're like Starbucks. I know we're not a big film festival, but important people come to see the film festival.
Yeah,
because of our location, people in the business and all the rest of it. So I would suggest that they add it to their list.
Nice
places to submit.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it still existed, the Hamptons International Film Festival. So
yeah, very much. It's like in its 27th year or something, 28th year. I can't believe it. I was a young kid when I started that.
Well, but speaking about being a young kid, we talked about. I read the Beatle book, or actually both Beatle books, Love You Make as well, and the Beach Boys, and I haven't read your entire canon. There's a lot to it, but your writing is so well done. It's a very easy reading. It flows nicely. So I'd like to go back to how you became a writer. What kind of turned the light bulb on? And I know you ended up at NYU. Were you studying journalism?
I graduated journalism at NYU.
No fooling, really.
Well, I'm younger than you. I was there from 78 through 81.
Yeah, well, don't throw that in my face. Oh, yeah. You're younger than me. I see. Well, listen, toddler. Let me tell you what it was like in the olden days.
Please do.
Reading by candlelight. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, tell me about having to get to school via horse. Yeah, I want to know.
So I went to NYU Film School, and I graduated completely equipped to do absolutely nothing. And so I got a job moving furniture in a cheap auction gallery in Lower Manhattan, not like Sotheby's or something. We used to fake antiques, and and if somebody died or moved to Florida, same thing. We used to go to their house and empty out the house of all the furniture and tag it. And then on Saturdays, I would carry it back and forth. I got paid $20 a day. And every day I would do the same thing. I would buy an album every day I would buy an album, which was like $3.99 then or something.
Where did you buy? Not to interrupt, but where did you buy
on
your
Second Avenue? I forget the name of the place on Second.
Where was it? Did you say
something Bob's, Super Bob's?
Oh, Bleecker Bob's.
Bleecker Bob's.
Bleecker Bob's. Yeah,
I was there every
Legendary.
Day, and I'd buy Chinese food every night, and I'd go home and I'd listen to the album over and over and over again, each album over and over and over again. And my friend Bob Fyden, who I mentioned before, who I later met, reprimanded me for not reading the lyrics as I listened to the album over and over again. And the rule was when you went to his house for a listening session, you had to read the lyrics along. We all would sit around and we would read the lyrics. And before he put on the test pressing, because he was in the business, he'd say, no, this and this, and this musician plays on this. And so in any event, I listened to it. And then I went to a bar called Max's Kansas City. Every night I went to Max's Kansas City and had a couple of glasses of wine. And of course, it was what Lenny Bruce would have called a character parlor. There were like lots of strange, different, unusual people there. And one night, this tall guy with curly blonde hair walks in and says his name is Marjo, a combination of Mary and Joseph, and that he was a child evangelist. He was ordained when he was 6 years old. He was on the Pentecostal tent circuit and made like $1 million by the time his voice changed. And
Marjo put the P in precocious.
And I said, actually, his mother held his head underwater in a sink to force him to memorize sermons when he was 6 years old.
Oh,
So he told me the story. I said, that's a book. And he said, I can't find a writer. And I said, I'm a writer. I lied. What am I going to say? Oh, I move furniture in an auction gallery and clean up the watchdog's poop. So instead I said, I'm a writer. And he said, if you can sell it, I'll write it with you. We said 50-50. We shook hands. And I went home. I smoked a big joint. I wrote a crazy proposal that started. And I'm telling you this for a reason. I know we're running shorter on time, but he said, there are thousands of them out there every night. They come from the flat plains in the Midwest and the big cities of the East. They come to see Marjo, the miracle child, anointed of God. And I sold the book. We sold the book. And the movie that was made at the same time as the book, but not based on the book, but we had the same logo and everything, won the Oscar for Best Documentary. And now, how did I write that book? I went to a library. I went to a library every day and got 3 biographies or autobiographies and sat in a chair with a yellow pad and wrote, the punctuation mark goes inside the quotation mark. I didn't know nothing. And this is information, and you give their child it here and maybe start. And that's how I wrote Marjo. And I didn't know. Otherwise, I had no idea what I was doing. And then I met Alice Cooper. Loved Alice Cooper. And I said, Alice, why don't you do an autobiography? And he said, sure. He said, you'll write a proposal. So I wrote this proposal. There are thousands of them out there every night. They come from the flat plains of the Midwest and the big cities of the East. They come to see Alice Cooper, Saturnalian rock star. Now, I swear to you, my next 5 books started that way. This is a blessing. Studio 54, the book I wrote called The Club, there are thousands of them out there every night. It works, doesn't it?
Oh, it's great, yeah.
So don't any of you out there use this. I'm warning you. No, there are thousands of them out there every night.
I promise not to steal
my patented copyright. I taught myself to write, and if I taught myself to write, we can teach ourselves to do almost anything if we want it badly enough. And I really believe that because I knew nothing about writing.
No, it's amazing. Your first book ends up being made into a movie that wins an Academy Award, and then Halston. It turns into a Netflix series where the lead actor wins an Emmy. So
thank you.
Just turned to gold.
Luck. Thank you very much. I've been very lucky. And also, again, if you work at it, if you really want something, Halston, I didn't know anything about design. I wasn't interested in Halston. But I learned a lot about design. You read books, you take notes, and you get into your subject. And Halston's family also helped me. They gave me interviews and stuff like that, and they really helped me along. So
yeah, and we would even mention your time at Circus Magazine, which
Circus Magazine was a magazine for young girls filled with topless rock stars. There were more male nipples than there were more nipples in Circus Magazine than there were in Penthouse.
there's thousands of them out there every night.
Oh, let me tell you, my time at Circus Magazine was not the most thrilling time. Well, I finished writing Marjo, and this guy, the publisher who hired me, thought, well, you know, this guy has his pulse on what's happening, so we'll hire him. And so anyway, so yes, I did Marjo, and I did Circus Magazine. And Circus Magazine was formulaic. There was a new album coming out. We put that group on the cover. We wrote about the album, and we started it. Every article started the same way.
There were thousands of them. No.
No. The best anecdote that you could find about the group came first. That was the first paragraph. The second best anecdote was the last paragraph. Then you had to fill in all the stuff in between. And that was literally the formula. So they fired me. Well, they should have. They fired me. It's okay. I went off to live with Alice Cooper. I did. I lived with Alice Cooper. I traveled with him. I lived with him. We shared hotel rooms. I was forced to learn how to play golf.
What was the most striking thing about him that maybe people wouldn't be aware of?
Kind. That's kind, sweet, a good soul, concerned about hurting people, about not doing the right thing. Just absolutely lovely. And then I knew that eventually he'd go back to religion because his father was a preacher and he married a preacher's daughter. And I knew that Alice would eventually go back and find himself that way. He runs a faith-based ministry now, Alice does, and still tours and everything. But I left there absolutely adoring the guy and everybody else that was involved in the group. And I haven't seen Alice in all these years. I keep on reaching out, but I don't know. I think from a place in his past that he doesn't want to revisit, you know, because, you know, he was drunk all the time. And also he said, there's no secret. And also he said to me, okay, you got to have a drink. I was Scoop. I don't know what his name was, but I was Scoop Gaines. And he said, okay, you got to have a drink because everybody has their signature drink. So I didn't know about drinking. So I said stupidly, okay, my signature drink is Remy Martin. Now, you can sip on a gin and tonic all day, but you have one Remy Martin and you're blitzed. I know how stupid I was to make that, you know. So I was throwing up on the golf course. I mean, I was, you know. Anyway, I love Alice. I love Alice Cooper, and that was great fun. You know.
Yeah, one of my favorite Alice Cooper stories, which maybe you even wrote about, is apparently he was invited, you know, because he played golf. He knew a lot of wealthy people, and he was invited to join them for lunch at a very exclusive club. So Alice comes in dressed very casually, and he's got his long hair. He's sitting with his friends. And he notices a table not far away filled with very stuffy looking wealthy people who are kind of snickering at him, you know, like, and derisively, like, what is this long haired person doing in our club? You know, how dare he? And just laughing and whatever, giggling. So at the end of lunch, he walked up to the crowd and he walked up to the most guilty of them. And he said to him, you know, buddy, it was really great hanging out with you last week at wherever. And then not missing a beat, he just walked away. And of course, his friends were looking. They were looking at the guy like, what?
That's so funny.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
And I'll tell you what, you know, having grown up just outside of Philadelphia and living outside of Philadelphia in South Jersey, I have to ask you about Gene London and the fact that I read online that you failed out of Temple University, and Gene London somehow you got involved with him and he encouraged you to be a writer. That's an interesting little tidbit I read somewhere.
Another weird thing, right? I went to Temple and I flunked. There's a plaque in front of Temple University with my name on it. It says the only Jewish person to have ever flunked out of Temple University is Stephen Gaines.
Oh, I love that.
So so I did. When it was a girl that I met there at Temple, Diane Brown, invited me to her home and some other kids, and her brother was there, who I thought had mental problems. Her older brother, and he was really strange. He was lifting up his shirt and showing his belly button and going and stuff like that. So I said to somebody, "What's with her brother?" They said, "Her brother, that's Gene London." I said, "Who's Gene London?" They said, "In Delaware Valley, Philadelphia, the whole Delaware Valley, it's the biggest, huge Charles star. He's like Captain Kangaroo."
Yep.
And so he pulled me aside. He said to me, "You come here." And we went upstairs and we talked about what I wanted to do in life. And he was lovely. And he said, "Let me read something you've written." And then he let me write one of his shows. Gene London Meets the Ghost of Agatha Dibley.
Wow.
And he encouraged me and did a lot of things for me. He was very, very kind and wonderful. And I'm so sorry he passed away. He fell down the stairs or something. And
yeah, he's legendary here in the greater Philadelphia area. I mean, everybody who grew up 60s, 70s, knows of Gene London. So when I saw that, I had to ask you about that.
Mark, that house, it wasn't her older brother, by the way. The people that owned that house, Diane and Sam Brown, had owned a day camp. And Gene was one of the counselors, the artist counselor who taught the kids how to draw and everything, way before he was famous.
Yeah.
So when he was in Philadelphia, he stayed in the guest room at the Browns' house. So he wasn't really her brother at all. It turned out that's where he stayed when, I was starstruck by Gene London. I was just totally, starstruck.
Well, your story is very much. I mean, we talk about the Beach Boys and we talk about the perfect storm of how everything came together for so many of us. Whether you've are accomplished in some field or not, your story is how everything comes together, and your story is a classic one of so many different things, so many different avenues that came together to do what you do. And that's why we enjoyed having you on the show tonight, just because it's a fascinating story.
Well, thank you so much.
And you're very accomplished at what you do. Your books that I've read so far, now I've got to go read more, are so good. And I wanted to pop up the website because I don't know if you have any other sites, but StephenGaines.com, going across the bottom there, that shows all of the books, in various covers and things. And it's a great place for people to at least start and say, well, what books does he have? And then I'm sure you'd have to do some research.
Somebody wants to talk to me or ask me questions or something more. Facebook is a great place to message me. So please go to Facebook. Stephen Gaines is on Facebook. And you've made my day, my week, my month. You've really made me feel so great. Thank you.
Well, that's wonderful. It's really been an honor for me to meet you. And
you have no idea how great it made me feel.
You said you have one more book in you. Do you know what it is yet?
No, I don't yet. I better figure it out. But I don't yet. I've had a bunch of ideas, but I'm not sure. Maybe Max's Kansas City.
That would be a great book. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a great, interesting place.
Yeah. I'll have to run some of my ideas through you too, because I've got tons of ideas that somehow need to have a genesis.
Please, I would love that.
And hopefully, yes, it was, and hopefully, Stephen, like I mentioned, I run a music festival. I just want to tell you one thing. One of the places in which we do it is Liverpool at the Cavern Club.
No fooling.
And we just did our 20th year there, and they honored me with a brick on the Wall of Fame.
Whoa, that's fantastic. That's great.
Have you been to the Cavern?
Oh, it was closed when I was in Liverpool.
Oh, in the 80s.
I'm not sure why it was closed, but it was closed when I was in Liverpool.
No, what happened was they closed in the early 80s because there was a club called Eric's that opened up across from it. And Eric's is featuring all the young, hot bands, and the Cavern were still doing older music. So the kids overran Eric's, and they drove the Cavern out of business. And but then they reopened in the late. They were bought by the name was bought by a couple of guys who still run it, and they reopened in the late 80s. They rebuilt it, and yeah, it's a great place now.
And they put all the bands who've ever played at the Cavern on bricks on the wall on Matthew Street.
Well, they did do that. Up in the ones who played in the Cavern. At the Cavern from 1960 through I think it's 73, they have them all up on the wall, and then from the people from 95 on, only the most famous people who played there, like Oasis and Adele and people like that, only they got bricks. And I'm part of that group, and I'm absolutely
Here's just so you know, Stephen. Here's a picture of David pointing to his brick.
Wait a minute, that's terrific.
I'm so proud of it.
You're right by the door frame.
Right by the door of the Cavern pub, right?
Oh, that's a good spot too.
Oh, that was an amazing spot.
Stevie Van Zandt is just below you.
Yeah, yep. and Clem Burke is just to the left of me.
Oh, how cool!
And there he is holding his brick before it goes on the wall.
Yeah, with my wife, who's been such a huge help. Without her, I don't know where I'd be. But I wanted to mention also that we'll be doing the festival in New York at the Parkside Lounge in November. So hopefully we'll have a chance to meet at that point.
I would love that. That would be
we'll arrange that for sure.
Thank you. That would be great.
Thank you, Stephen.
Goodbye. It's good to see you. Nice to meet you. Thank you again.
Have a great one, my friend. An absolute pleasure to talk with you, and best wishes. And we'll be sitting here waiting on what that next book is.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
As always, and enjoyed it. Thank you, Stephen.
Take care, Stephen. Thank you.
Wow,
that was so. Yeah, this was a great interview, and I'm glad Tim Allen mentioned that this was the best one. I mean, he's such an engaging person, and he's very proud of what he's written, and he did remember a lot of what was in Heroes and Villains, which is cool.
Which it's just, it was
John Borak was
Yeah, some of the things he was saying is like, oh, did I write that? But then he had a copy of the book right there. He was looking.
I know he was looking up Croxy Adams,
which was great. Yeah, what a wonderful interview, and just I mean, we didn't. If you go out online and you look at everything he's been involved with in his life, we didn't even touch on so much of
few things we didn't touch on.
Yeah, and
the whole thing with Marjo. I mean, again, this kind of shit can't happen now. I mean, he's at Max's Kansas City. He encounters Marjo, who's telling him all about himself and talking about wanting to have a book written. And Steven says, "Well, I'm a writer," when he's not.
Yeah.
And Marjo says, "Well, let's write the book together." I mean. Who does it? Who can do that now? You can't.
It's amazing.
I mean, if you met a celebrity and you said, "I'm a writer, let's write a book," it would have to go through about 50 different people.
Well, first of all, you have to go through about 50 different people just to meet a celebrity like that.
I mean, if you happen to just encounter one,
I know.
like he did, and you hit it off for whatever reason, you walked up to that person, started talking to them. And you hit it off, and they had casually mentioned about a book, and you said, "Well, I'm a writer," or you said, "Well, I'm an actor," and they said, "All right, well, we'll have." I mean, it would have to go through a committee of like all of their handlers before. Back then, it wasn't like that. Marjo said, "I want this guy writing the book," and he wrote it. I mean, not even looking at his pedigree, which he didn't have at that point.
Right. Well, and that's what's fascinating about so many people we talk about or talk to. They take their tape and they just walk into the major label and said, "Here, listen to this." And
it's really amazing. What a time it was. I mean, I feel I've always felt like Brian. I guess I just wasn't made for these times. But here's another way. I wish I was back there when something like that could actually happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the problem is, hindsight's 20/20. We can look at that all and be nostalgic about it. You know, be a little bit. We could lament the fact that, you know, it doesn't happen like that today, because you hear about it, you think about it, you're like, oh God, if only, you know. But those days are gone, you know.
Yeah. No, and I mean, why'd you have to do this? It should say, "Where's the her, John?"
Yeah.
No, why?
Yeah. But
that was a quote that Al Jardine had about Brian's girlfriend, Carolyn Wilson, Carolyn Wilson. Carolyn, what was her last name? I forgot. John may remember. Anyway, yeah, he did walk arm in arm with her, and Al Jardine, because she was a black lady, Al Jardine wasn't happy that he was in public putting his arm around her. Felt it wouldn't help the Beach Boys image, I suppose.
Yeah, what a fascinating interview. Really something.
No, yeah, he's great. I hope to meet him in November.
Well, I mean, he seems genuine. He seems like he enjoyed the conversation tonight, and yeah, I would see. I'm not exactly sure where in New York. He said he lived. He
said he lives at the end of Long Island.
I think, yeah, Long Island, because I think Howard lives on Long Island.
Yeah, Howard always has. I think
he's like 2 miles from Howard, so he's got to be out on the end of Long Island. So, you know, I'm sure it'd be great to hook up and have some dinner and hang out. That'd be great.
Mark won't look too good for the photo shoot tomorrow. You remember what that line is from, Mark?
Yeah, where's that from?
That's when they were in Australia and they were having a meeting with David Frost. And Rocky Pamplin got angry at Carl because he thinks he sold drugs to Brian.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, Rocky's he hits Carl in the face. And when Carl comes to, he says, "I won't look too good for the photo shoot tomorrow."
That's right. Okay, I got you. Amazing.
Well, one of the best non sequitur quotes. Rocky and Carl are going back and forth. They're arguing about something. It's rock and roll, David. That's I think that was Stan Love that said that to David Frost. But yeah, so Carl and Rocky are getting angry at each other, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the line, "They'll come to you, Carl." We have no idea exactly what that means. If you look at the conversation, it's completely out of context. And then Rocky says to he said, "They'll come to you." Rocky snarled. That's a favorite of John Borak, that he snarled. And then Carl says, "Fuck you," and Rocky jumps up and says, "Don't you ever tell me to get fucked," and goes and hits him.
How many times have you actually read the book, David?
Oh, probably about 15.
I was going to say, and same thing with John. There's a question. How many? Because I've read the book. I mean, through once. Probably goofed around with it a second time, but in preparation for this interview, I went back and went through it, you know, fairly quickly just to refresh my mind. But I can't come up with the quotes like you guys can.
No, I mean, we've read it over the period of years. Plus, he and I will.
You keep it going. You keep it going. Yeah.
So one of my favorite scenarios I wish happened. They talk about May Rovell, Marilyn's mom, where you know the guys used to stay over there a lot, at their house, and she would cook meals for them. And then of course Brian started dating Marilyn, but apparently she would not say the word fuck. The closest she ever got was fick.
Fick, yeah. Not just.
So I always joke around and said Stephen got the. I should have said this while he was on. He got it all wrong. It wasn't Rocky Pamplin at that meeting. It was May Rovell, and she said, "Fick me, huh? Don't you ever tell me to get ficked."
Oh, funny shit. Yeah, I remember that. That was good stuff. Well, that was fantastic. Episode number 165 here on Material Issues. If you missed it, you know, make sure you subscribe over to materialissues.com. Look at all the archives. All 165 episodes are over there on YouTube, and we appreciate if you would subscribe and let everybody know. And we've got great stuff coming up. Hard to believe we've got 165 episodes under our belts.
We do indeed. And in fact, next week we continue with our authors. we've got Paul Zolo coming up next week. I met him. He's also a musician. I met him at the Harry Nilsson tribute. And he's written a few really cool books, Songwriters on Songwriting, More Songwriters on Songwriting, Conversations with Tom Petty, Hollywood Remembered, and several others. So we're going to have him on talking about his books. On the 14th, the 14th, right.
Yeah.
We're going to have our good friends, Sparkle Jets UK.
Nice.
On the 14th. And they have a brand new record called Box of Letters. It's on the Big Stir label. It's a bunch of songs that they'd written and recorded over the past several years. This is their first proper album in many years. It's really great. And we're going to have from the band Jamie Knight, Susan West, and Michael Simmons. Let's walk around the pool. Yeah, John Borik's just going to continue to regale us with quotes, which is fine. So anyway, so that's on the 14th, and on the 21st, what do we got?
The 21st, we've got Carl Caffarelli. People will know him from his radio show, but some books he's written as well. A brand new book, The Greatest Record Ever Made, which is a wonderful book where he just starts espousing these great, I guess we can call them power pop rock and roll records. That you may or may not be familiar with, but Carl's a really good writer and he's a huge music fan. So it's a very interesting book on really just fantastic singles, records ever made. So he's going to talk all about that, and probably his radio program as well. Wait a second, we got another John Borak coming in.
That's a quote.
Carl's coming on the 21st. Yeah, that'd be great. It's gonna be great.
That's a quote from Dennis when he was really down and out near the end of his life. He had a friend named Jordan, and he was they were both drunk, looking up at the stars, and he was lamenting his life. And he said, "Nobody loves me, Jordy. Nobody." And at that point, he unfortunately he kind of wasn't wrong.
No, could you imagine being Dennis Wilson?
Not for a second.
In Southern California in the early to mid 60s, with the popularity, the money, the looks that he had.
I can't imagine ever being nicknamed the Wood. That's for sure. No, I couldn't imagine for a second being Dennis Wilson.
The book goes into a little bit of his, escapades and
a few of them, yeah.
But hard to, and you and I discussed it before. Brian and Carl did not get the looks, but somehow the DNA process.
It's amazing how the genetics worked on that. I mean, they weren't unattractive guys. It's not just the looks. It's not just the looks. Dennis had raw sexuality about him
and confidence, and
even when he played the drums, he looked like he was orgasming.
Yeah. What did he say in the drums? He wasn't. His quote was something about I wasn't that technical. I was what did he say? He was like a pounder or a thumper, or
Brian always called. Brian called Dennis a clubber.
Clubber.
But Stephen Gaines said that he could play a mean boogie woogie. Yeah, I mean, no, he wasn't technically great, but that didn't matter so much live. I mean,
right.
But live again, the girls were always focused on him because he had that animal sexuality about it. It wasn't so much that he was. I mean, he was a very good-looking man, but he wasn't that much better looking than Brian. It's just that Brian looked soft and sensitive and cuddly, and Dennis looked like raw sex. Like he'll destroy you, and you'll love it.
But the book does say there was a competition between Dennis and Mike to getting the best-looking girls, and the book says Mike won most of the time.
Mike was the front man.
He was the front man, but
that helped. I mean, it's like
I never found Mike Love an attractive man, though, and I didn't think he was.
But he also had a lot of swagger about him.
He did.
He was the front man of the Beach Boys. He didn't have to look good. All he had to do was walk up to some woman and say, I'm Mike Love. I'm the lead singer of the Beach Boys," and he'd get laid. I mean, he didn't have to do anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, I mean, Mike. I mean, I don't know that Mike. I doubt overall. I doubt Mike beat Dennis. I'm sure Dennis destroyed him in the female contest.
But
I gotta think that.
can you just imagine?
No, I can't. Well, John's last quote is hilarious. That's from Dennis. Dennis and Mike didn't like each other at all.
Yeah.
And on their plane there was a meditation room, and Mike would go in and do his meditative thing, and then Dennis would go in and he'd take a woman and have sex with her in there. And Mike was not happy because he'd go back in and the air would be fragrant with Dennis and his girl's spent passions. Didn't make him happy. Not the best environment to meditate in.
Such a great book. And Stephen Gaines, what a great guy to talk to, man. That was really good. So I was running the banner across the bottom. You can go to stephengaines.com. That website shows pictures of all the things that he's written, all the books. You can't really click on anything. You can't really buy it, but it'll give you an idea of what's out there. And you can search on, Google, Amazon, eBay, because some of the books are out of print and you can't find them. So you got to go to eBay. But if you haven't found Heroes and Villains, the true story of the Beach Boys, or the Beatles books, The Love You Make, relatively new, I highly recommend. If you're a Beach Boys, if you're a rock and roll, if you're a 60s rock and roll fan, I highly recommend you pick it up.
Hey, John, I have to ask you, does your wife Christy have a problem with you being a member of the Golden Penetrators? What does she say about that? Because this is a line John loves to use.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, John, where is it? What does Christy say about you being a Golden Penetrator?
It's coming. He's probably had to backspace a couple times. He's nervously typing.
Maybe he won't respond to that.
Air on material.
There it is.
There we go. Never like to think your husband being a member of a club called Golden Penetrators. It was tough.
Yeah, that was Dennis Wilson's wife at the time, Carol, who said that. Golden Penetrators. Anyway,
next Wednesday we've got Paul Zollo, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.
We have Paul Zollo, the author. Then we've got Sparkle Jets on the 14th.
And Carl Caffarelli on the 21st.
So 3 out of 4 weeks we have authors.
And I mentioned tomorrow I actually get to see the finished short film that I was talking to Stephen about there a little bit, and I'll report next week what I think about it, whether it's cringeworthy looking at myself on film.
Big Poop and Little Poop. Was it Dennis's nickname or Barbara, his second wife Barbara's nickname for them? Yeah, he was Big Poop and she was Little Poop. I met Little Poop.
I don't know if I prefer being Big Poop or Little Poop.
I met Little Poop at the Denny Bash at Shay J, the place he hung out, long before he died. He would hang out there and get drunk. But it's
interesting because
she was there, along with I'll give John an opportunity for another line, along with Dennis's son Gage, who looked just like him. I mean, he was really the spitting image. I'm sure Mark.
It's funny that John Barr brought that up, because when I was young, I was in Indian Guides, which was kind of like the Boy Scouts, but based on Indians, and my Indian name was Big Poop. Yeah.
What does that actually mean in Indian?
Runs with scissors.
No problem. Gage too. Yeah.
Oh, what a great time! Great show tonight, man. That was
it really was. And of course, we have irons in the fire, so maybe
we always do.
Maybe my next week, if IPOLA doesn't completely engulf me, maybe I'll have a new guest. Maybe Mark will for the end of August and into September.
Yeah. So stay tuned. If you haven't joined the Facebook page, which we update the group, the Facebook group Material Issues, or if you haven't subscribed over at materialissues.com, do that. you'll get at least some alert of what's coming up in the future, so you can mark your calendar so you don't miss it. Especially if you want to join us live, we love when people make comments. And tonight was great because John Borg was chiming in with a lot of these quotes, which Stephen Gaines really enjoyed. So that makes the.
Did you like my observation? And again, a lot of people are just so.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. They're almost freaked out by it, but it's true. In the context of the book, Manson was at best the fifth worst person in there. Because you could argue for Landy being worse than him in the book.
Oh yeah.
So you've got 5 people who are probably worse than Manson.
Exactly what you said. In the context of the book,
Manson, it's hard for people to wrap their head around that because of all the absolutely heinous things he did. But
yeah. So if you want to know, go out and buy Heroes and Villains. You can get
the thing. There were just so many evil people in that.
That book. Very much so. Very much so.
Both Brian and Dennis really bore the brunt of it.
Amazing story.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, so thanks so much, everyone, for hanging around with us. We'll see you next week. It'll be in the middle of IPOLA, but our shows are only at night during the week, so I'll be here at 3:00 Pacific, and Mark will be here at 6:00 Eastern with Paul Zollo, who's written some really cool books. So,
and best of luck and have fun with IPOLA starting Friday. Tomorrow night, Friday night. 2 nights at the Redwood Bar.
And going through the 10th, the following Saturday.
There you go. A whole 8 days.
John Borak, you did good. There's no championship hand class. You know who would be doing the championship hand class now?
Yeah.
If you watch The Big Bang Theory, right?
Yeah.
Barry Kripke would be doing that. Sheldon all the time if it was still in vogue. Because it's such a put down in a way when you do that. You're not just bragging about yourself, but you're disparaging the other person.
Yeah.
You're like putting a dagger right through them because you beat them at something. So,
well, love to Rena.
Love to Chaz.
Right on. We're going for a walk right now. He's sitting over there looking at me like, "Are you finished yet?" And I'm getting there. But we'll see everybody next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, materialissues.com. Have a great weekend. Rest of the week. We appreciate it. See you later.
Likewise. Take care, everyone.